Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Eric Shiraev. I teach international relations, and we will study today a very interesting subject, one which is new to international politics, to the studies of international politics, because it represents a big problem. However, the attention to this and policies toward this problem or these problems is a product of past few decades. Last time we talked about environmental issues and discussed how environmental problems and policies toward them, how they change our life and how they could affect our life, and different views about how to deal with environments and coordinate the actions of so many states, so many disagreements, so many policies. Today, we will turn to human beings again, although we are part of environment, but specifically we discuss issues which are human. Humanitarian policies. It's about human dignity, it's about human life, it's about human pursuit of happiness, it's about us as human beings. So the most essential things that refer to us as humans, regardless of our nationality, regardless of our religion, ethnicity. So us humans, human beings, the most essential issues and problems which affect all of us. I'll give you examples to clarify the subject. As always, I share the screen with you and identify most important definitions, key issues, give some examples. Details will be discussed in class, book, other sources, but we begin with, as always, with definition of most important terms, and most important examples also will be discussed at the moment. So we are here, and we begin with a case which took place some time ago. Rwanda, small country in the middle of Africa. Ethnic violence broke out there, which problems were lingering there for years, but that was a disaster. And thousands of people were killed, hundreds of thousands were killed as a result of this ethnic conflict there. And also millions become refugees, and they sought shelter and life in neighboring Burundi, Tanzania, Uganda, Zaire. This was a disaster of enormous proportions. And meanwhile, the world was watching from a distance. What was happening? Why? So thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people being slaughtered, and the world is watching. Many reasons exist, and let's think about, and also very briefly, that's the political situation there. It was the end of the Cold War. The world was seemingly entering a new phase of peace, prosperity, maybe even borderless world. No borders, no restrictions, and finally people live together in peace and justice. And then conflicts may occur, and well, they became sort of a nuisance in the minds of many politicians. Yes, they're terrible. Yes, they're horrible, but they were inconvenient thorns in sort of a body of world politics that time. They appeared this way. The absence of a common enemy. So the Soviet Union no longer saw West as enemy, and vice versa. China was transforming slowly and surely. And so the sense of danger, sense of responsibility somehow began to evaporate. When life is good, or when life appears to be good, we tend to pay less attention to the pains of others. For some reason, we do pay attention, but yes, we pay attention, but for some reason, we pay attention less. And so we have less motivation to go and help. We call it complacency, maybe. Complacency is a result of for many things, and one of them is belief that, well, you have done everything and life is good, and you live a good life, and you will continue with this good life. This tragedy, which took place a long time ago, but it's an epic proportion of a disaster and a very sad case, but it highlights a very core question in international relations. When one country or several countries face a tragic loss of life or acute suffering, Do other states have the obligation to intervene? It seems to be obvious. Yes, yes, yes. Why not? If somebody is in trouble, we have to help. It's so easy. It's not so easy, because you help, you commit your men and women in uniform who risk their lives. You commit resources. You commit the time and energy of so many people who also may believe that's why us. They also have to commit, and they too, and they too, and they too. There are political aspects of these issues. There are economic, the logistical problems, and also public opinion. You understand that there are many people who say that, so, well, it's too bad, and our heart goes out to them. We can contribute a few dollars, but don't expect us to do more, because we do have our problems. Well, so we deal with the issue of humanitarian crisis. Generally define them as a threat to health, safety, security, and well-being of many people, usually confined in an area. Here, issue of interventions, assistance with or without use of military force to reduce the disastrous consequences of a humanitarian crisis. The concept of sovereignty or humanitarian sovereignty, essentially identical. It means that the country's responsibility for its own humanitarian policies are sacred. And the countries have the right to accept or reject interventions. Think about this. A sovereign country, by definition, a sovereign country is responsible for everything that takes place inside its borders. There's no above authority, unless there's certain agreements with a certain power. We studied in a section of international law that some countries invite international or foreign support in certain cases. But what if it's not such an agreement? So your country, and things happen, good things, bad things, but you're the country responsible. Specifically, the article in a UN Charter says, and I read, nothing shall authorize the United Nations to intervene in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of any state. Clear and simple, right? Clear and simple. And yet, I think your hearts and your minds say something else. To at least as you have different thoughts about it. Is it really is how we're supposed to live our lives? Is it really just we supposed to stay put because it's legally it's not our business, or if it's our business, it's not our responsibility to do certain things? And the point of view which appears here on this slide, it's from Doctors Without Borders, one of the most powerful and most effective non-government organizations, which for decades now organizes help, assistance, medical assistance, and other forms of assistance to people in dangerous conditions, people who suffer. They say the decision to intervene in any country of crisis must be based solely on independent assessment of people's needs, not on political, economic, or religious interests. It should be based on essentially our heart, is how we think and how we feel that the people should be helped right there. Yes, there are economic factors. Yes, the political, religious, and many others. But they're supposed to be secondary. We help people above all because they're human beings. It looks like so many problems existed in the world, but they all can be categorized in only three big categories or clusters. And you think about this. Pandemics like COVID-19 and infectious diseases, including AIDS, will today, the fewer and fewer of us now to put AIDS here on the very top of world problems. It has been, say, 20 years ago and 15. It's a big problem still, but it looks like the world is resolving this issue. Looks like resolving. I use continuous tense. We haven't resolved it yet. Of course not. But now pandemics, and this is what we're facing in 2020, and hopefully it will be somehow contained and resolved pretty soon. So diseases. So chronic starvation and malnutrition. Hunger is still a problem in the world. Close to 1 billion people today in the world don't have enough food to eat. So we don't call them object poor, close to 1 billion people, though fewer and fewer of them, but still 1 billion people. And also a category of other forms of acute suffering associated with physical pain, associated with pain, distress, and so other forms of human suffering. The causes are multiple, and here the slide allows me to show only a few of them. Natural disasters, obviously, overpopulation, especially big cities, and the people just crammed in those small spaces. Involuntary migrations, due to violence and threats of violence, people move. Syrian crisis, the Syrian crisis is one of the most recent and saddest examples. Mismanagement, just don't get me started on this issue because it's endless. Politics connected to mismanagement, mass violence, extreme poverty, and many others that are interconnected and all affect the course of pandemics, the effects of the fact that so many people remain extremely poor, object poor, and hungry, and also contribute to other forms of human suffering. And we include this trafficking in persons and child labor and many others. Policies, certainly problems exist, yes, but what kind of policies should we have? And there we go, just a short list of those policies. The humanitarian intervention, to which I'll pay attention in 20 seconds. You intervene, you do something regardless of what other countries say. You do something to help people. Relief efforts, well, it's mostly gentle. So you give something that people need, food, for example, medicine. Crisis prevention, that's more complicated. You do everything, or at least something, to avoid possibility of mismanagement, because well, very few of us can predict when the earthquake strikes or a volcano erupts. So you prevent possible consequences of those natural disasters. Population policies. It's not about controlling a number of people being born. No, it's about job creation. It's about housing. It's about distribution of jobs in the country. It's about building, construction, infrastructure, and many other aspects of this type of policy. Anti-poverty policies, refugee policies. Well, there are so many policies, so they are they're available. The point is the investment in these policies and also details. Of course, the biggest problem is also in details. Returning back to interventions, we distinguish between peacekeeping. It's armed forces of one or several countries cross state borders in response to genocidal violence. And genocide is considered to be a deliberate extermination of people based on certain people, period, but usually it's based on certain characteristics of them. So race, ethnicity, religion, and other factors. Intervention has two goals. It's stop the violence, which is in fact peacemaking. So just you don't choose sides, you go there and stop violence. And second goal is more difficult, often more difficult, creating conditions for lasting peace. We call it peace building. See, it's easy to say and maybe look okay on the slide, but both are daunting tasks. Tasks involve legal, logistical, political, global challenges to these policies. How is it different from war? And we see and often hear criticism, just saying that, and here criticism goes in the same way, something like, well, they, under the pretenses of humanitarian intervention, they attack, occupy, and keep. Can it happen? Yes, it can happen, and it has happened in the past, of course. However, in the view of international relations theory, this is theoretical view, aggressive warfare is different from peacekeeping because there's no plan to occupy permanently or seek annexation of our state's territory. And there is not necessarily the pursuit of a regime change in the country, and countries don't pursue this goal in most cases. Second, humanitarian interventions aim at political forces that use deadly violence against population, oppose an immediate threat to violence. Yes, use violence against the violence. You use violence to prevent a disaster. You impose your will to avoid a case of bigger catastrophe. So it's unpleasant, but it's even like I can say that you choose between two ills, just two evils: violence to stop more violence. But that's the compromise that we talk about. And the third difference, it's interventions, which we call humanitarian interventions, require legitimacy in the form of international mandates, such as UN Security Council resolution or an agreement among several countries. That gives more legitimacy. That's a very interesting point of view, which we discussed in the past. If there's a one country acting alone is illegal, what if 5 of them acting outside UN? Is it legal too still? And opinions vary about this, but when countries act in accord, together, it gives more legitimacy to actions. Policies are supposed to be based on impartiality, so you don't take sides. Independence, you act out of your goodwill intentions, and I point to my heart saying that this is what you do. You act out of your compassion and kindness and moral principles, and also humanity. It's about, again, compassion, kindness, and preservation of life. There's 3 principles. Repeat again and again, easy to say, difficult to conduct. Realism is not that's neutral or doesn't give cold shoulder to humanitarian policies, because real politics suggests that there are problems that's associated with those crises. Crisis creates instability. Countries' core interests are affected. And if there's instability and your interest as a country are affected, you need to act. Same thing refers to international stability. So you see the threats take place, the region becomes unstable. It's not good for most countries. And power distribution, stability, strategic stability are key terms that realism uses. Therefore, interventions are justified and justifiable in these cases, because they stop or at least reduce the threat of instability. So that's the resolution for real politics. So real politics is not against interventions. That's justified by this way. Key case here, Bosnia. I've studied this case before. I travel. I've been to that region, remind you, it's back in 1990s. It's 1990s, and so there's a little mistake here. And yes, as we speak, I will change it. So just will make it visible. It's 1995. 1995, occupation of Bosnia. It was a terrible lingering conflict, which by 1994-95 took the lives of close to 100,000 people, citizens of former Yugoslavia, divided along ethnic lines. There were Christian Serbs, there were Orthodox Christian Serbs, there were Catholic Croatians, and there were Bosnian citizens called Bosniaks. They're Muslims, Sunni Muslims, vast majority of them. So the Slavic group, ethnically the Slavic groups, yet they divided along I would say tribal and religious lines, living together for many years. Now, just when Yugoslavia broke into pieces, unfortunately, political interests prevail, and they use ethnicity, religion to advance their interest. War, yes, again. But let's put aside those reasons and excuses. Remember, humanitarian policies must be impartial. Here we say, we don't care who started. We don't care who is doing what. We want you to stop right now, and then we'll figure out how to avoid future conflict. And that was the example. And the bad news was that when the conflict began in 1991, the world was idling. The world was watching for so many long years, discussing who goes and under what conditions. So what kind of power you're going to have, whether or not UN would authorize use of force, under what conditions, and how many soldiers would be there. The war continued there, unfortunately. In 1995, the United States made a decisive move and finally persuaded their allies to deploy troops into Bosnia. And there were countries such as US, of course, Canada, Germany. Germany had to amend the constitution to join their international coalition. Italy, France, Russians were there. Turkey and Pakistan also participated in those actions. Just to show solidarity and help. And countries did this for a number of reasons, of course, but one of them was the biggest reason was stopping fighting. And that was an example of, I would say, real politics in action, because one of the biggest arguments was there, just war, instability, spread of a conflict, death of thousands of people. It cannot continue, may not continue. Let's stop it. And it was done. And also realpolitik principles were here implemented, because no one just got upper hand. No one could claim just we occupied and just we control. It's international coalition. That's made sense that Russians came there too, because historically they support Serbian forces, and Serbian ethnic groups in Bosnia were supported by Russians, and Russian public opinion was on their side. It made sense. Russians came there. And there were also forces from Muslim countries. That just makes sense, because 1/3 of the Bosnian population has been Muslim. It made sense, right? It's just to have a group, the troops, it's same faith. It's important for people, especially for victims, it's not only just personal comfort, it's just trust. That was an example of international coalition. The liberal view is expectedly is more robust and more diverse. A crisis is not only doesn't only creates disbalance. It's also is the biggest threat to human rights of individuals. Yes, it's source of disbalance, but the most important thing here is that people's rights are here rejected or offended or ignored. Right to live on territory of your choosing, your historic ancestral roots, right here. Right to have access to education, to food, to work, to jobs. Principles of humanitarianism, which mean that that's human beings supposed to be treated as human beings, not as first and second class citizens. And also the concept of responsibility to protect, one of the most controversial concepts in humanitarian policies. The liberal view embraces point of view. I'll explain this in a few seconds. So instability, it's a legitimate concept. However, there are other views right there and other reasons why force is supposed to be used here. Intervention is supposed to be used. Maybe without force, but it's without asking for consent of a country into which affairs you interfere. And also one of the possibilities, again, one of the maybe most ideal outcomes, desirable outcomes, is the prevention of future conflicts through the global governance. So the institution and the function to govern together and to prevent a possibility of similar conflicts from happening in the future. R2P is a concept which I just present to you very quickly. Is a relatively new concept. R2P, responsibility to protect. the concept which means that countries have the moral right to intervene for humanitarian reasons and not just out of strategic or security considerations. This responsibility, think, it's not just your right to intervene, not only possibility, but responsibility, which means that you have a inner obligations is to do something and to help. Like I use an example, which is maybe simplistic, but you know, all examples are simplistic, and analogies can work and cannot work well in political science, international relations, but still, there's a house and something is going on there. You see, the child is crying and I believe the child is being abused there, by whom I don't know. But you believe child is really suffering at this moment. When you enter the house, you're trespassing. You violate the code, you violate the law. You're trespassing on someone's territory because the neighbor didn't invite you, but you do it anyway, and so you knock on the door and so you simply say, look, I'm concerned, I want to see what's going on, and then you help. For example, you rescue the child from hands of a drunk abuser. So have you done something illegal? Yes, you have. Just trespassing, and well, just you come in without, basically you're breaking in. Just you force yourself into the house, and yet you did the right thing. You did the right thing, and this is something which we do all the time in this world. Not necessarily just acting within the frame of law, but we do right things by helping, by rescuing, by saving lives. That is concept of R2P. You can imagine this is something which is overwhelmingly rejected by the opponents of this concept. The concept has been adopted in 2005 on UN World Summit, but it's not something mandatory. So it's a sort of a policy which is recommended, and so future late UN Secretary General Kofi Annan was the biggest supporter of this concept, and many American politicians and foreign policy professionals were in support of this concept. It's considered to be most modern, most, if you will, radical approach to international relations, but to humanitarian crisis, which is based on I repeat, very important premise that we must go and help. Not just we have the right to do so, not only just we want to, but we must do this. This is our moral responsibility. You can imagine that conflict theories consider humanitarian help as a product of inequality, and it's a global inequality, and they believe that, say, in the past, those interventions were done for various reasons, and one of them just expansionism. And today, one of the views is that under the banner of a humanitarian intervention, the power of unelected international institutions also is expanding. So it's not on behalf of people who elected them, but on behalf of own, maybe good or maybe other intentions. The things are being done, and one of those intentions is a consolidation of own power. Feminism has many positions, of course, here, but many points of view within this mainstream political and cultural movement. Feminists raise a very important point. It's humanitarian problems disproportionately affect women. And unfortunately, women did not receive due attention from the international community. They receive attention, but in fact, this has been happening, and it is about as we say, not only about, say, crisis associated with ethnic conflicts or civil wars associated with national problem, religious problems, so human trafficking, it's slavery, it's a forced marriage, it's sex slavery, and many other problems that affect women. Men also affected, but can here the key question is disproportionately women are disproportionately affected by these problems, challenges, let's say. So now, I give example of Biafra here, just to prove the point, or at least to support the point of conflict theories, suggesting that there are interests, and that certain interests of countries represent their powerful groups, and so they decide whether to act or not to act. Most of you, let me say, many of you haven't heard about this Biafra. What is that? That was a huge conflict, a big problem back in the 1960s and 70s when a group of officers and supported by some politicians in southern part of Nigeria declared independence from Nigeria, and the Nigerian government, instead of fighting in the battlefield, they established and enforced a blockade, basically starving millions of people there to death. Without access to internet wasn't invented then, without fax machines, without quick communication devices, the world was learning slowly about the problems, and thanks to the photographs and reporters who were there, the world learned about this mass starvation of individuals, and yet there was no intervention. The intervention was not conducted for a number of reasons. The French, the British, the Soviets saw this problem as a political problem. Yes, people keep dying, but this is intervening these problems on behalf of one group will send a wrong signal to others. The Soviets didn't want to go because they thought that the worsening crisis will ruin the reputation of Western countries. So see, the worse, the better for us. If they suffer, the more they suffer, the more we improve our positions in Africa, saying, see, we told you so. The West doesn't care. That's what position of Moscow was. And also Moscow didn't want to also create a precedent. Just small groups will declare independence left and right. What if some of those groups will declare independence in the countries under control of Moscow? Same logic was used in London, in Paris. So countries, leaders were looking, watching, and not acting and not saving. Some also use this argument to suggest that, had it happened somewhere in Europe, the help will be there delayed, but will be given. It's in Africa, too far away. It's out of area of concerns of many white politicians. So I don't think that was a key argument, a key reason why help was not given, but it could have been, absolutely could have been. But that's one of the worst disasters that's happened in the 20th century, humanitarian disasters. Well, as I put here, the interest of stability prevailed, and people unfortunately died. Constructivism suggests that we must understand these policies and treat them more in a more sophisticated fashion. We must understand the country's history, must understand political struggles, must understand ethnic divisions, understand perceptions, and understand what is contemporary climate there. The Soviet Union was so active in delivering humanitarian aid, not necessarily for their kindness, because of their kindness and because it was so generous. No, it was political. There was an element of kindness, I believe so, but it was political, just to help only those countries that belong to your camp. If you support Moscow, you get help. If you don't, you will not get any help. As soon as political winds change, the country which is receiving help will not receive help. Country was receiving help will not receiving help will get help. So back and forth. You become generous and outspoken about your generosity if it serves your political interest. This is true. In fact, this is what also conflict theories in part suggest, and this is an element of politics, of course, has been. So interests interests change and policies would change. I put a picture of former presidents Boris Yeltsin, late president of Russia, and Bill Clinton. So instead of clashes in 1970s, 1980s between the countries, well, in 1990s was a consensus and joint interests and joint actions, and that in fact that helped both countries to move and resolve, at least ease the conflict in Bosnia. Basically, not seeing each other with suspiciousness, but understanding, cooperating, and doing something together. So also constructive suggests that humanitarian policies toward human beings based on the domestic political climate. I'll give a diagram which is roughly, it represents political winds in Europe and the views of immigration. So migration is a humanitarian problem. So how many people are supposed to come? Under what conditions? How long they're going to stay? Can they stay forever? Who can help them? How much? So many issues, so many problems, so many opinions. In Europe, it's parties on the left believe that believe in equality, believe in the necessity of help, believe in humanitarian values, but also believe that new immigrants will become voters and vote for parties on the left. That's the consideration. We don't often talk about this, but this is consideration. The more of them, the better for us. We have big heart, we very kind, and yet we see potential voters for us. That's the example. On the right, yes, we should say that restrictions are supported. Most or many on the right see immigrants, especially Muslims, as a threat to European cultural identity. That too many of them are supposed to stay in their home countries. If they are here, it must be sent back as soon as the situation gets more stable. And those parties also have been gaining and still gaining support in many European countries. So compared to, say, early 20th century, they are very much powerful these days. Parties in the center, most parties in Europe are in the center. They support sympathetic views of immigration, so long as it doesn't hurt the job market and housing. So that's the balance. Some immigrations could be good. Some migrations could be not so good. So there must be a balance. Jobs, job security, stability, safety, borders, coordination of policies, those policies are local. So we talk of global immigration policy of European Union, but essentially the votes come from those small countries, small regions, small counties. So people vote according to their interest. And in conclusion, and I'm finishing my review, contemporary conditions create new wave of humanitarian challenges. We know about health risks associated with global travel. We've known about before, but into year 2020, we learn this for the fact. And global travel also increases illegal trafficking in goods or in people as well. Global migration creates problem of overcrowded megacities and also, unfortunately, ethnic tensions, which we thought would disappear by the 21st century, but it's not the case. Climate change affects environmental and health, make worse environmental and health hazards, and affects deepening poverty in some regions. And poverty, problems, health hazards affect individuals. Individuals suffer, they move, they die, unfortunately. Policies are needed for this. The conclusion here is that the poor remain the most vulnerable to threats to their health and the safety because they, by definition, they have restricted access to food, shelter, safety, lawyers who can protect them, politicians who can care about them, and therefore one of the most important arguments which unifies different isms and different political groups is that's if we address the issue of global poverty, if we reduce poverty, we reduce threat of many the humanitarian problem. So people who are not poor will be less concerned about ethnic, religious, and other divisions among themselves. Whether this is right or wrong, this is something which history will judge and tell us, or we'll judge ourselves. In our next lecture, and don't forget, in this lecture, there will be samples of questions we can access and check them online, questions and answers, sample of questions, chapter related. But in the future, in the next, next lecture, we'll talk about forecasts about what political scientists, scholars in international relations, and politicians and writers, what they thought and what they think about the future of international relations, how things will develop in the future, and whether or not our forecasts have any validity. They do, but not all of them. Thank you so much for your attention. It was Eric Shiraev. I'll see you later.